Everything was set: venue, vows, and forever. Then one name on the guest list changed everything. I never thought I'd be that guy. The one who cancels his wedding weeks before the big day. Not over cold feet, not because of scandal, but because the woman I loved blindsided me in a way I still can't fully wrap my head around. This isn't one of those stories where there's a smoking gun moment. It's more like a slow realization, a sickening dawning of just how deep betrayal can run. But let me rewind a little. I'm 34 now. This all went down a little over a year ago. At the time, I was engaged to a woman I'll call Rachel. We'd been together 4 years. She was the first person I ever truly let my guard down with after everything with my family imploded. More on that in a bit. Rachel and I met at a friend's ugly sweater party. Super cliche, I know, but she laughed at my terrible Rudolph sweater with the googly eyes, and we ended up talking until 3 a.m. while everyone else passed out around us. She was sharp, grounded, the kind of person who could call you out on your BS without being cruel about it. I thought she got me in a way no one else ever had. We moved in together after 2 years. She saw me through job layoffs, my dog's passing, and a particularly nasty bout of depression in year 3. I thought, this is it. This is the person I build a life with. So when I proposed, quietly at home on the anniversary of our first date, it felt right. Simple. Solid. Like the life I'd always wanted was finally within reach. Until she invited my sister to the wedding. Behind my back. Without telling me. Let me explain why that's not just a casual oops. My sister, Tara, is a walking tornado. Always has been. We grew up in a household that looked picture perfect from the outside. Dad was a well-respected dentist. Mom hosted fundraisers and made Pinterest-perfect centerpieces. Tara was the golden child. Pretty, charming, the kind of kid teachers loved and boys followed around like puppies. Me? I was quiet. Always reading, drawing, staying out of the way. I learned young that Tara had 2 faces. One she showed the world, bright, affectionate, self-deprecating in a cute way. The other, she reserved for me. Manipulative, cruel, always looking for a way to make herself the center of attention, even if it meant throwing me under the bus. She lied about me constantly growing up. Said I broke things she broke. Accused me of taking money from Mom's purse. She once convinced our parents I was skipping school and sneaking out at night, which I absolutely wasn't, and they grounded me for a month. I missed a huge art competition I'd been prepping for. Later I found out she'd forged a note to the school counselor and deleted texts from my phone to sell the lie. That was when I started emotionally checking out. Just surviving until I could leave. When I finally moved out at 18, I barely looked back. I went low contact with my parents after college when I realized they were never going to see Tara for who she really was. Every family gathering was a performance. She'd hug me and say, "Missed you, bro," and 5 minutes later she'd be telling our mom that I looked exhausted or a little unwell lately, with that faux concern that always made me look like a mess. The final straw was when she sabotaged a job opportunity I'd worked months for. She knew the hiring manager through her sorority. Fed her a story that I had a history of instability and had been in trouble before. None of it was true, but it cast just enough doubt that I didn't get the offer. I cut her off. Full stop. Told my parents I wouldn't be in the same room as her again. They call me dramatic. Told me she's family. But they didn't defend me. Not once. Rachel knew all of this. She was there the night I got the call from my dad asking if I'd consider letting bygones be bygones and come to Tara's engagement party. I'd hung up, shaking, and Rachel had held my hand and told me I didn't owe anyone anything. So yeah, when I say she knew what Tara did to me, I mean she cried with me while I recounted it all. She helped me draft the no-contact letter I sent 2 years ago. That's what made the betrayal so brutal. The first crack showed 3 months before the wedding. We were knee-deep in planning. Venue secured. Dress bought. I was stressing about final head counts when I noticed a name I didn't recognize on the guest list spreadsheet Rachel had shared. "T. Andrews?" I asked, pointing at the screen. "Who's that?" She didn't look up. "Oh, just someone from your side of the family, I think. Your mom gave me a few names to include." I felt my stomach turn. "You talked to my mom?" She paused. "Just about the list. She said she was worried some people would feel excluded." I stared at the name again. "T. Andrews is Tara," I said slowly. Rachel finally looked at me, face neutral. I thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe it was time to start healing. I was so stunned I couldn't even speak. "I didn't want to blindside you," she said, even though that's exactly what she was doing. But I also didn't want to make a whole thing. I walked out. I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I just left and sat in my car with the windows down, trying to breathe. That night, she tried to spin it as compassion. Said she believed in forgiveness. Said Tara had reached out, wanted to make things right, and that it might be good for me to at least have the option of reconnecting. She said she regrets everything. Rachel added gently. I asked, did she say what she did? Rachel hesitated. Well, not in detail, but then she doesn't regret it. She regrets not being in control anymore. Rachel didn't get it. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. I should have canceled everything then. I really should have. But I wanted to believe she'd come around. That she'd realize this wasn't just an old grudge. It was a wound that never closed because my family kept pretending it wasn't there. I gave her a choice. She doesn't come. Period. If she shows up, I won't. Rachel didn't argue. She nodded. Okay, I understand. I wanted to believe her. Then came the final blow. It was 2 weeks before the wedding. I was at the venue for a tasting appointment Rachel couldn't make because of a work thing. One of the coordinators handed me a printed seating chart to review. I scanned the tables casually, mostly looking to make sure our friends weren't stuck with weird extended family. Then I saw it. Tara Andrews, seated at a table near the dance floor. With my parents. I stared at it for a solid minute. Thought maybe it was a mistake. An old draft. I asked the coordinator, is this the final version? She smiled. Yes. Rachel sent it over yesterday. I thanked her. Walked outside. Called Rachel. No answer. Texted her. Why is Tara on the seating chart? No reply. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't eat the next day. Just sat with the fact that she'd looked me in the eye and agreed to my one boundary and broken it. That was the moment something inside me clicked. Not a dramatic snap. Just a quiet settling. The realization that I wasn't going to walk into a life where this kind of betrayal was normal. Where I'd have to look over my shoulder at every family gathering, every future kid's birthday party, wondering what lies were being whispered behind my back. I wasn't going to marry someone who thought peace meant me swallowing poison so everyone else could feel comfortable. So I canceled everything. I didn't make a scene. No big confrontation. No angry texts. No dramatic speeches. I just stopped. Stopped answering Rachel's calls. Stopped engaging. And when I finally did respond, it was with a single sentence. I won't be at the wedding. Don't contact me again. She came to the apartment that night, rattling the door like she expected me to cave and let her in. Please, just talk to me, she shouted. This is a mistake. I didn't open the door. Instead, I slid a manila envelope under it. My half of the signed lease termination notice and a note that said I'd be staying at a friend's for the next month. The movers were coming for my things on Saturday. She banged once more, then left. I heard her heels click down the hallway like punctuation. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I was empty, but not broken. More like I'd finally stepped out of a room filled with smoke and could breathe again. The fallout came fast. First came the texts. Dozens of them. Rachel alternating between apologies, rationalizations, and outright guilt-tripping. I was trying to do the right thing. You're throwing away 4 years over one decision. I'm the one who's heartbroken. You're just walking away. Then the calls from my parents. I didn't answer. Then the emails from Tara. Yes, Tara. I stared at her name in my inbox for a long time before opening the first one. Subject line, let's talk like adults. The message read, I'm really sorry things turned out this way. I genuinely wanted to reconnect and be there for your big day. I thought you'd come around once you saw I was serious about changing. Rachel believed in second chances. It's a shame you don't. I didn't reply. The next one came 2 days later, more bitter. You always were dramatic. No wonder Rachel didn't tell you. She knew you'd overreact. You need therapy, not isolation. That one, I blocked her for. I spent the next week couch surfing between two of my closest friends, Jake and Olivia, who didn't ask for the details unless I wanted to give them. They just let me be quiet, let me sit with my thoughts, and occasionally shoved food at me when I forgot to eat. On what would have been my wedding weekend, I went hiking with Jake. We hit a cold, cloudy trail upstate and barely said a word the whole time. At the summit, I remember looking out over the gray hills and feeling calm. Not good, not happy, but calm. Like maybe, for the first time in a long time, I'd chosen myself over pleasing everyone else. 2 weeks later, Rachel sent a final message. Just one line. I hope one day you understand what you lost. And for a moment, I faltered, because that's the tricky part about betrayal. Sometimes it's not just about what someone did, but the way it makes you question your own instincts. For 4 years, I believed she understood me, loved me, chose me, and now I had to face the fact that either I'd been wrong all along, or she'd changed. But here's the truth I kept coming back to. Love without respect isn't love. It's possession. It's comfort. It's convenience. She thought I'd eventually get over it, the way people get over a hangnail or a bad haircut. She never once acknowledged that inviting my sister wasn't about kindness. It was about control, about managing appearances, about playing peacekeeper in a war she didn't understand. She never asked what I needed. She just decided. And that's not partnership. The months that followed were quiet. I moved into a new place across the city. Smaller but sunnier. Big windows. Secondhand furniture that didn't match but felt like mine. I started drawing again. Nothing fancy, just pencil sketches on my balcony, sometimes with a coffee, sometimes with a beer. It helped me think. I went to therapy. For the first time in my life, I started unraveling not just the trauma of Tara, but the pattern she'd created in me. The people-pleasing, the fear of conflict, the way I'd learned to measure my worth through other people's comfort. My therapist, an older woman named Joy, said something during one session that stuck with me. You were trained to tolerate pain so others could avoid discomfort. Yeah, that hit. 3 months post-wedding, that wasn't. I ran into someone unexpected. It was at a bookstore. I was browsing the nonfiction table when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Adam. I turned. It was Kira, a mutual friend of Rachel's and mine. We'd lost touch after she moved for grad school, but she was always one of the more grounded people in our circle. Kind. Smart. No time for drama. Her eyes widened a little when she saw me. Whoa, you look peaceful. I laughed. That's a first. We caught up over coffee. She didn't pry, just gently said, I heard things went sideways. I nodded. That's one way to put it. Kira hesitated, then leaned in. Look, I don't know if you want to know this, but I feel like you deserve some context. I braced myself. She continued. Rachel didn't just invite Tara behind her back. She planned it with her. For months. They'd been emailing. Rachel told a few of us she thought you were being unreasonable and that once you saw your family again, you'd soften up. She shook her head. I told her that was messed up, but she was convinced she was doing what's best. I thanked her. She didn't say more. She didn't need to. That night, I reread Tara's last email. You need therapy, not isolation. And I smiled. Because I was in therapy, and for the first time, I wasn't isolated, I was free. That was the shift I didn't see coming. The quiet clarity that grew each week after I walked away. I realized how much of my life I'd spent managing other people's feelings. Bending. Smoothing. Keeping peace that came at my own expense. Walking away from Rachel wasn't just about the wedding. It was about refusing to build a future on the same broken foundation I'd grown up with. It was about choosing peace over performance. Then, 6 months after the canceled wedding, something odd happened. I got a letter in the mail. A real one. Handwritten. No return address. Just a name. Tara. My first instinct was to toss it. But curiosity won. It was 2 pages. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. Here's the gist. She and Rachel weren't speaking anymore. She claimed Rachel cut her off after everything blew up. She said she never meant to cause real harm, and that Rachel was the one pushing for reconciliation. And, most bizarrely, I'm pregnant now, and I've been thinking about family a lot. That line, like her getting pregnant, somehow reopened the book on our relationship. I didn't reply. I didn't even finish the letter. I just folded it back up, slid it into a folder I keep for documentation. You grow up with a manipulator, you learn, and put away. No one got exposed on social media. No big fights. No revenge plot. But here's what happened. Rachel moved to another city a few months later. I heard she's seeing someone new. I wish him luck, genuinely. My parents tried to reconnect with a Christmas card and a photo of them holding Tara's newborn. I didn't reply. I published a small zine of sketches I've been working on. Scenes from my city, little moments of solitude and peace. Nothing fancy, but it sold out at the local indie shop. And last week, I went on my first real date in almost a year. Her name's Maya. We met at an art exhibit. She asked thoughtful questions. She laughed with her whole face. And when I told her, casually, that I don't talk to my sister anymore, she didn't flinch. Just said, yeah, sometimes distance is healthy. That felt new. There's a strange kind of silence that follows a decision like the one I made. Not a peaceful silence, not right away, but the sort that feels like standing in an empty room after a storm has passed. You can still smell the rain in the air. You still hear echoes of everything that fell apart. But there's also this fragile, open space where something new might begin if you let it. The first few months after I walked away from the wedding, that silence was the hardest part. I'd been so used to reacting, dodging emotional landmines, managing other people's expectations, defusing guilt grenades, that once it all stopped, I didn't know how to just sit still. But slowly, that space became something else. Not a void, but a clearing. It gave me time to see things I hadn't allowed myself to before. Patterns, mostly. The way I'd made myself small for years. At home, in relationships, even in friendships. The way I confused love with compliance. The way I'd taught myself that peace meant swallowing my own voice. Rachel wasn't the first person to cross a line with me and call it care. She was just the last straw. Funny enough, I started sleeping better. Not all the time. There were still nights when I replayed every conversation, every red flag I'd ignored, but the background anxiety that had lived in my chest for most of my adult life, it faded little by little. My body stopped bracing for the next betrayal. There was one night in particular I remember. It was sometime in February, bitter cold. I was walking home from a late dinner with Jake, the air sharp against my face, streetlights pooling gold on the wet pavement. A car passed too close and splashed my jeans, and normally I'd have cursed under my breath and let it sour the night. But instead I laughed. Not bitterly, not sarcastically, just laughed, because I realized I was okay. Wet pants, canceled wedding, broken engagement, and all, I was still here. Still standing. And it was enough. I made the right choice. Rachel never apologized. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. Not in a way that acknowledged what she actually did and why it hurt so deeply. She'd try to justify things one more time, though. I ran into her by accident, maybe 4 months after everything went down. It was at a mutual friend's birthday party. I hadn't realized she'd be there. I guess neither had she. We locked eyes across the room. She froze. I gave a polite nod and went to grab a drink. I didn't approach her. Later, she caught me by the coat rack as I was heading out. Her voice was softer than I remembered, almost hesitant. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, she began. But I want you to know I really did love you. I met her eyes. She looked tired. Smaller, somehow. I know you think I betrayed you, she continued. But I believed I was doing what was right. I thought if I could help fix what was broken with your family, we'd be stronger for it. I let her talk. I owed her that much. Or maybe I just wanted to hear how she'd explain it one last time. When she finished, I said, "You didn't try to fix anything. You tried to erase the parts you didn't like." That caught her off guard. "You wanted a version of me that had no history," I said, more calmly than I felt. "One that came pre-healed, no complications. You never asked what I needed. You just assumed you knew better." Her face crumpled for a second, and for a moment I thought she might say something real. But she just blinked, nodded tightly, and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. By spring, I'd settled into a new rhythm. Morning started with quiet coffee and sketching. I'd built a little corner in my apartment with a drafting table and soft light, and for the first time in years, I drew without a purpose. Just images that made me feel something. Hands clasped in shadow, the outline of fire escapes against morning fog, a sleeping dog curled under a bench. Afternoons, I freelanced part-time doing graphic work for a few nonprofits. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on and let me be selective about who I gave my energy to. And some evenings, I'd go for walks. No destination, just city blocks and music in my earbuds, letting the rhythm of movement untangle whatever thoughts had knotted up that day. It was on one of those walks that I bumped into Maya again. We'd met once before, briefly, at an art exhibit. She'd commented on a piece I was staring at, something about how the shadows in the painting were doing more storytelling than the figures themselves. I remembered liking the way she said it. Observant. Thoughtful. This time, we ran into each other in line at a pop-up bookstore. She recognized me first. "Sketchbook guy," she said, smiling. I raised an eyebrow. Shadow commentary woman. We laughed. Talked. And when she asked if I wanted to grab tea, I surprised myself by saying yes. It wasn't a date, not really. Just two people talking about art and city noises and the best kind of rainy days. But it was easy, and that was new. We started meeting up casually. No pressure. Sometimes at galleries. Sometimes just sitting on her fire escape with plastic cups of cheap wine, trading stories. She never pried about Rachel. I offered pieces when I felt like it, mostly framed as a thing I went through, not the defining trauma of my life. And she listened. Not like someone waiting to respond, but someone hearing me. The first time I told her about Tara, I expected the usual polite concern, maybe a reflexive family's complicated. Instead, she just said, "That must have made you feel really alone." I nodded. It did. She didn't say anything for a while. Then, "I think it's brave, honestly, to choose peace over belonging." I hadn't thought of it that way before. Eventually, I told her everything. About the wedding, the guest list, the seating chart, the silence that followed. She didn't flinch. She just said, "You didn't run away from something. You walked toward your own damn life." I think that's when I knew I was ready to let someone in again. It wasn't all clean. Healing never is. There were days I'd wake up with a pit in my stomach, dreaming about Rachel's face on our would-be wedding day, or hearing Tara's voice echo in old nightmares. Some part of me, conditioned by years of playing the scapegoat, still whispered that I should have tried harder, been more forgiving, kept the peace. But another part, stronger now, reminded me that love built on silence isn't love. It's survival. And I'm done just surviving. One day, months later, I got another email. Not from Rachel, not from Tara, but from my mother. Short, measured. She wrote that she'd heard from several people about the canceled wedding, that she was sorry things didn't work out, and that perhaps someday we can talk. No acknowledgement of what happened. No mention of Tara. Just the same vague, passive attempt at smoothing things over without doing any real repair. I closed the email and sat with it for a while. Then I deleted it. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. No response. No rage. Just a quiet refusal to participate in the version of the story they keep trying to write you into. Maya and I took things slow. Neither of us were in a rush. We both had our own histories, our own careful ways of protecting ourselves. But the more time I spent with her, the more I noticed how little I needed to brace. I didn't walk on eggshells. I didn't second-guess every word. We disagreed sometimes about music, politics, where the best coffee in the city was, but it never felt like a threat. Just space to be two whole people standing side by side. One night, we were sitting on my balcony after a rainstorm. She was curled under an old quilt I'd had since college, and I was sketching the way the streetlights reflected in her tea. She turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about what your life would have looked like if you'd gone through with it?" I considered that. Sometimes, I said, but it's more like I see it from a distance now. Like watching a movie I almost agreed to star in. She smiled. "What genre?" I smirked. "Psychological horror." She laughed. "Good call, skipping the audition." We sat in silence for a while. Then I said, "I think the hardest part was realizing that love isn't always enough." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, but love with truth, that's something else." I looked at her, really looked, and I knew I wasn't just healing anymore. I was growing. It's been just over a year now. One full rotation of seasons since the day I stood in that apartment, holding the wedding invitation in my hand like it was a live wire, reading the name I never expected to see. 1 year since everything unraveled and somehow began again. I'm not the same person I was. And honestly, I'm grateful for that. Back then, I thought love meant compromise. I thought loyalty meant tolerating harm. I thought keeping the peace was the same thing as having peace. Now, I know better. These days, my life is quiet in the best way. No drama. No chaos humming under the surface. Just the daily rhythm of things I've chosen on purpose. Coffee that tastes the way I like it. People who call when they say they will. A life that fits the shape of me. I moved into a new place last fall. A small studio above a bookstore, with creaky floors and a crooked window that lets in perfect afternoon light. I painted one wall a deep, stormy blue, and hung a shelf for all the books I used to tell myself I'd read when things settled down. They've settled. Maya still comes over most weekends. Sometimes she brings pastries from this spot she found in a back alley downtown. Sometimes she just brings herself, barefoot and humming, and sits on the floor beside me while I draw. We don't define it. Whatever this is, it's steady. Mutual. No games, no performances. Just two people who like each other and aren't afraid to say so. There's a kind of freedom in that. A softness I didn't know I needed. A few weeks ago, I got an invitation in the mail. Not a wedding this time. A baby shower from my cousin Danielle. I almost laughed when I saw it. She and I had been close as kids, then drifted apart, mostly due to proximity and time. But she'd reached out last winter, gently, asking if I'd be open to reconnecting. No pressure. Just coffee if I was ever up for it. I was. Turned out she'd seen the whole thing unfold from a distance. Family group chats, social media whispers, the usual noise. But she'd also heard what Tara had done. Apparently, not everyone had bought the lie. "I always thought it was weird," Danielle said during that first conversation. "How quickly they turned on you. How Tara played the victim so easily." I asked why she never said anything. She looked down at her cup. "I didn't know if you wanted to hear from me. I figured you had your reasons for keeping your distance." I did, but I'm also learning that not everyone deserves the same wall. Some people actually mean well. Some people change. So I said yes to the baby shower. I showed up with a modest gift, a little handmade blanket I'd picked up at a local market, soft and seafoam green. Danielle hugged me like we'd never lost time. Tara wasn't there. Neither was my mother. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. Later, Danielle pulled me aside and said quietly, "Just so you know, I think what you did was brave. Most people stay. You left. That matters." I didn't have words for that. Just a quiet nod. A deep breath. It mattered to me, too. I won't lie and say everything's perfect now. That's not how life works. Sometimes I still flinch when the phone rings from an unknown number. Sometimes I wake up from a dream where I'm back at the wedding venue. Everyone's staring as I explain why I'm leaving. There's no timeline on unlearning fear, but those moments are fewer, lighter, easier to carry. More importantly, I don't live in that story anymore. I visit it sometimes, sure, memory's stubborn like that, but I no longer let it define me. If anything, it reminds me of what I've built since. There's this idea people have that walking away is the coward's choice. That if you love someone, truly, you'd fight to the end. That forgiveness means return. But I don't think that's true. Sometimes love means leaving. Sometimes forgiveness is silent. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not fight at all, but simply refuse to keep bleeding for people who don't even notice the stain. I used to think healing would look like confrontation. One final showdown. Words that would make them see. But the real power? It came in not needing that anymore. Rachel got married last month. To someone else, obviously. I didn't find out directly, just through the trickle of social media updates from mutual acquaintances. I didn't feel angry, just curious, detached. Someone sent me a screenshot of her wedding photos. Not maliciously, more like a, "Hey, remember her?" kind of moment. She looked beautiful. Soft curls, classic dress, the kind of wedding I once imagined we'd have. I studied the image for a second, then deleted it without responding. Not out of bitterness, but because she's no longer a chapter I'm reading. I wish her peace. I really do. Even if I know we'll never speak again. Even if she never truly understood what she did. Some lessons aren't ours to teach. Tara, as far as I know, is still posting passive-aggressive quotes on Instagram and pretending to be the hero of a story that's only real in her head. Let her. I used to think karma would look like some big fall, people getting exposed, losing everything, the whole dramatic crash. But now, I think real karma is quieter. It's living a life built on lies and wondering why nothing ever feels right. It's knowing deep down you're surrounded by people who only like the version of you they can use. It's needing to control everything because you're terrified of what happens when you can't. I don't need revenge. I have peace. One last thing before I end this. A few weeks ago, I found a drawing in an old sketchbook I'd buried at the back of a closet. It was from almost 2 years ago, back when I was still planning that wedding, still trying to be someone else's version of good enough. It was a sketch of a chair. Just a chair. But the lines were tight, overworked, erased and redrawn so many times you could barely see what it was supposed to be. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned the page. The next drawing, clearly done after, was of the same chair. But looser, lighter, confident strokes. Still imperfect, but whole. Like someone had stopped trying to force it into being right and just let it be. That's me now. Still imperfect. Still learning. But whole. I didn't write this to shame anyone. I wrote it because maybe someone out there is standing where I stood. Confused. Hurt. Second-guessing themselves because someone they love made them feel like setting a boundary was a betrayal. If that's you, you're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not too sensitive. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to leave a situation that hurts you, even if everyone else thinks it looks perfect from the outside. You don't have to burn down your life for anyone else to stay warm. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk out into the cold and build a fire of your own. It's worth it. You're worth it. Thanks. Don't forget to subscribe and share this story.